Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. After spending several weeks focused on crisis in Syria and in North Korea, the president is going on another immigration offensive. This morning, the administration announced plans to crack down on criminal gangs like MS-13, whose growth has been fueled by illegal immigration.
They're getting the hell out or they're going to prison. And so many towns and cities are thanking me because we have gotten rid of a burden that you would not believe. I mean, it is a serious problem and we never did anything about it, and now we're doing something about it.
In just a minute, we'll talk to the point man on this question, Attorney General Jeff Sessions, about his plans to stop MS-13. But first, MS-13 wasn't the president's only immigration concern. Earlier today, the president signed an executive order ordering reforms to the H-1B visa program that lets companies bring in foreign workers to fill jobs that allegedly Americans are not capable of doing. Billionaire Mark Cuban is a vocal supporter of H-1Bs. He says that importing foreign labor makes America stronger. We spoke with him about the president's order. Mark Cuban, thanks for joining us tonight. So the president's H-1B oriented executive order will slow down that visa process from abroad. You've said in past statements you think that's bad for America. How so?
Right. Well, there's two parts to the H-1B story. First, there's the hoarding of visas, which I think is a problem. You get a lot of outsourcing companies that apply to the lottery in huge numbers, and they just win a lot of visas and they use them for lower paying jobs. That's wrong. Hopefully this addresses it. On the flip side, there's the other side of getting the most qualified applicant for a company. And going out there and searching the world for the best applicant, I think, is a good thing for American business. It allows us to compete globally in ways we may not have otherwise been able to.
I mean, that's the talking point, and it makes sense, I have to say, on its face. But the reality, as you know, is that 80% of the foreigners admitted under H-1B make less than the median income in the field in which they work. In other words, they're being brought over not because of their skills, but because they save labor costs. That's a subversion of the idea.
But okay. Correct. But remember, I said there were two elements here. The jobs that were companies are just but it still makes a difference, right? The nuances, the details matter, Tucker. The companies that are hoarding visas, they're the ones that are causing the problem you're mentioning, where people are coming in and they're forcing down wages. That's bad. That's wrong. That's not at the core of the value of H-1B visas. So when you look at the actual numbers, you're exactly right, and hopefully this will address it. But when it comes to competing for the best talent around the world, I'm a big believer in American exceptionalism. I believe we can compete, and when someone from one of our universities, when a native-born American or an immigrant, naturalized, however you want to define someone working here in the United States, when they can't get the job, we get smarter. We know, if someone doesn't get a job from me, I tell them, work harder, get smarter, you'll get it the next time around, you'll get the next job. I think that's good for everybody. Except
in a lot of those cases, we don't get smarter, we get unemployed and go on disability. I mean, 44% thereabout of recent college graduates.
Go on to disability?
Yeah, I mean, people actually stay out of the labor force for huge, long periods of time. They're not even counted in the official numbers. That's how long they're out of the labor force.
That's so far out of left field, to assign a disability issue.
Look. I'm talking about SSI, disability insurance, which is one of the ways that people make do when they don't have a full-time job, as you know, and it's a huge issue in this country.
Yeah, of course. People going on disability when they shouldn't is an issue. That's an issue to be addressed. But don't attach it to the H-1B visa issue.
But again, look, I'm not attacking anyone for being disabled. You're missing the point. What I'm merely saying is we have a huge unemployment problem in America, and that also extends to people who just graduated from college. Over 40% of whom say they're underemployed. So we have a massive labor pool that's educated in our system, and yet they're being turned away in favor of people who are educated abroad. That does not help America in any way.
Well, again, part of what's going to change is the visa hoarding. I can't emphasize that enough. That is where Americans get undercut in the pricing for jobs. Problem, we agree there. But where there is better talent external, that's global, we have to go get them. Otherwise, those people are going to go to other companies around the world. They're going to come in and compete with our companies. And not only will the job be lost that was given to the better talent, but the companies that needed them, all those other people that work for those companies may lose their jobs as well. So from a bigger picture, and look, Tucker, either you believe in capitalism, either you believe in the market economies, or you don't. There's no in between. And part of that market
economy, part of
capitalism is how people compete for jobs, right?
I love that. When did the left become addicted to market fundamentalism?
Oh, no.
There are many in betweens. Of course, there are.
I'm not the left, Tucker. Tucker, I'm not the left.
Would you apply market forces to your marriage, to your family? I mean, there are limits to how far. No, I'm serious. Capitalism is not a religion. It's an effective way of generating wealth. But to the extent it hurts Americans, shouldn't we respond? I mean, we don't do something just because it's like big consistent with capital. I don't know. You're the one who said, well, are you against capitalism? I like capitalism. But when it hurts Americans, I'm willing to make adjustments. Wouldn't you be?
Well, isn't that the nature of capitalism? Isn't that the nature of a market economy? That in the short term, there is dislocation, there is disruption, but hopefully, because of American exceptionalism, because we are who we are, that we believe in entrepreneurship, we believe in the American dream, that entrepreneurs can go out and use their knowledge to create new companies. So yeah, right. I hate the displacement that occurs when there's change, but the reality is, in a capitalist market-driven system with adjustments and with, there's things where we give some on a true market system, and that's a good thing. I'm not for, laissez-faire libertarianism. But in this particular case, if American companies can't go out and hire the best talent, then those American companies are still going to have to compete with those smarter people
right. No, I get
in the global economy, no matter what.
I get it, and I think that's a fair point. But will you also concede there's something kind of repulsive about watching billionaires like Mark Zuckerberg or the guys at Microsoft invoke the Statue of Liberty and civil rights in an effort to get cheaper labor from India? They basically say this is a nation. No, it's like, no, you're big employers and you want to hire people cheaply. So stop lecturing me about Rosa Parks, right?
First of all, I don't go out. I have never used an H-1B visa to go and bring somebody in any one of my 150 plus companies. So I just want to get that on the table.
Right.
As far as Microsoft and Facebook and some others, I don't think they're using outsourced labor, which again is what is driving down the pricing, is what's causing jobs, and where you're seeing the examples of people having to train their replacements. I think for the most part, they pay premiums. In the studies I've seen, Facebook and Google in particular, when they hire, they pay a premium. They're not coming in to cut down the price of labor.
Do you think it would be fair for the U.S. government to require employers, when they bring over people on an H-1B visa, to pay them market price and to not undercut American labor when they bring those people in?
On the surface, that makes perfect sense. I think that's happening. But again, Tucker, I can't repeat it enough. If you get rid of the visa hoarding, the problem that you have, and I agree with you here, we're on the same page here. If you get rid of visa hoarding, that problem disappears. If you change the lottery so that it's based on the job, it's based on a meritocracy, that problem disappears. So I really agree that there's a necessity for changes in H-1B, but getting rid of the hoarding will solve that problem.
So why has nobody done this? I mean, I don't want to get too political with you. I know you're not a political guy, but gee whiz, we just had 8 years of the Messiah who cared about ordinary Americans. This is a problem. You're conceding it's a problem. Why didn't the last administration address this? Maybe because they were in bed with the tech community.
Well, maybe, but at the same time, you have to prioritize. And, I don't have an answer for you. Look, I'm not a liberal. I'm not a conservative. I think for myself. I'm an independent. There's always a way to find answers to specific problems, and government doesn't always deliver those. And so, I'm not going to speak to why it didn't get solved before.
Fair point. Mark Cuban, thanks a lot for joining us on that. Appreciate it.
Always fun, Tucker. Thank you.
This is a Fox News alert. Fresno, California residents were terrorized by a mass shooter today. According to early reports, the alleged shooter may have been motivated by Islamic radicalism and a hatred of white people. For more on this story, we go to Jonathan Hunt, who is there. Jonathan?
Tucker, it's important to point out off the top here that the FBI tells us it is not at this point treating this as a terrorism incident. It's equally important to point out that according to the Fresno police chief, after firing 16 rounds and killing 3 random people, 39-year-old Corey Ali Mohammed shouted Allahu Akbar, Arabic for God is great, as he was taken into custody by a police officer. The police chief also says Mohammed sometimes called himself the Black Jesus, and on his Facebook page made anti-government statements statements and said he did not like white people. All three of the victims in today's shootings were white men. Police had apparently been searching for Corey Mohammed since last Thursday, when he allegedly shot and killed a security guard who was also white at a local Motel 6. They say he has a criminal history involving guns, drugs, false imprisonment and terrorist threats. He also had a history of mental illness, according to court documents, suffering from psychosis and a substantial degree of paranoia. A press conference going on right now, again, with the police chief, Tucker. We'll bring you up to date if there's any new information. Tucker?
Jonathan Hunt, thanks a lot. By the way, the press is, of course, doing its best to downplay the likely motive for this attack. The AP reported the shooter shouted, quote, "God is great." Of course, he did not shout that. He shouted Allahu Akbar. The language he used matters, and the Associated Press knows it matters. We don't want to be unfair, though. Maybe it will turn out he was a radicalized Methodist or an extremist Presbyterian or maybe even a Lutheran with a grudge. Obviously, we will keep you posted as we discover it. The Trump administration, meanwhile, is vowing to defeat the massive criminal enterprise known as MS-13. Today, the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, blamed a nearly open southern border for the gang's rise and says that defeating them will be a top priority for his Department of Justice. The president chimed in, tweeting this: "The weak illegal immigration policies of the Obama administration allowed bad MS-13 gangs to form in cities across the U.S. We are removing them fast." So what is the plan to beat MS-13, which is estimated to have 10,000 members in the United States? The Attorney General of the United States joins us now. Thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you, Tucker. Good to
So
be with
to
you.
what extent are the immigration policies of the last couple of presidential terms tied to the rise of MS-13?
There's no doubt that it had an impact because so many of these people are illegally here, and they came without proper authority, and with a good lawful border, many of them would not be here. They've sent some of the most violent people who would never have cleared a proper visa situation, a visa process. They had crimes they've committed in El Salvador. So yes, I don't think there's any doubt that the open border, the lawlessness that we've had, is a factor in the rise of this MS-13.
So some of them, we know, came here as unaccompanied minors illegally and were allowed to stay. Under the former policies, do you know if an unaccompanied minor was found to have ties to MS-13, would he have been immediately deported or allowed to stay?
No, I think the MS-13, the undocumented people who came were sent here by their leaders back in El Salvador, many of them operating from jail where they're serving murder convictions and those kind of things. So they were directed how to enter. If they came and claimed themselves as a minor, and the Obama administration let them come in the country, then took them to their destination city and turned them over to some relative that claimed to be a relative. So they had a mechanism to enter the country. Now they've been here, a number of them have, for a number of years, but in the mid-80s and up to mid-90s, really 2000, about 2009, we had some real progress against them. The numbers dropped. The violence was on the defensive, but they've come back aggressively in the recent years.
So there are cases documented of MS-13 members bragging about exploiting our permissive immigration laws. How will you change the policies to keep them out?
Well, first we're going to secure the border. We're going to build a wall. We're going to add more agents on the border. The numbers have already dropped dramatically. March was the lowest entrance of illegal immigrants in 17 years in this country, and that's Donald Trump's leadership. He is determined to do that and end this lawlessness. We're backing him up. The Homeland Security Department is really working hard, and we're going to continue on that. And so the numbers are down. So when fewer enter, our Border Patrol have a much better chance of catching those who do, identifying those who are violent, and deporting them.
Here's what I don't understand. That seems like a pretty obvious solution that any country acting in its own interest would do. Why hasn't that been done? Why, if we knew these people were coming from El Salvador and joining a criminal enterprise like this that killed people, why would we allow that?
We just simply have been in denial about this whole process. We are having a lot of people come to the country who are not dangerous illegally, but a lot of them are, and these groups are, and there's been such a political defense of the entire process, defense and attack of anybody who wants to end the lawlessness. What we want to say to the world is, please come lawfully.
Yes.
Wait your term, make your application, and it'll be evaluated. And if you're accepted, come. But don't come illegally. That's what the American people have a right to expect their government to do. And in the process, we can protect them from some of the violent criminals and terrorists that are coming in.
So the government of El Salvador has designated MS-13 a terror organization. Would it be helpful for our government to do the same?
I think so. Perhaps. I believe it could qualify for that. There are rules that I guess the State Department does to establish that. But we know they're violent. We know that if we focus our prosecutorial and investigative resources, and we had a meeting today with all the top federal law enforcement officers and the agencies in our government to focus on this group. And as we have cases and we work them hard, we pursue convictions, and then we deport people who are here unlawfully, we can devastate this gang. We're going after them. We are not going to allow them to take over a block, a corner of our communities and terrorize people with this violence. They use machetes. They kill children. They put children in prostitution at age 12. This is one of the most violent gangs in the history of our country, no doubt about it.
Really quickly, I want to put up a map of the spread of MS-13. They're not just in the border towns you would imagine. They're suffused through the country. How hard will it be to root this group out in all these different cities?
Tucker, it's going to be hard but not impossible. These are not geniuses. They're not the top criminals, and many of them are poor criminals, actually. They're involved in the kind of activities that can be identified and they can be prosecuted. It's 40 states have MS-13 members in them. We've got 10,000 now in the country. But I believe if we stay at it, we can devastate this organization, and that's going to be our goal.
You wonder when all this happened. Mr. Attorney General, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Up next, an election tonight in Georgia is being treated as a referendum on the president's leadership. We'll give you an update on what happened there. Plus, there's been no further action in Syria since the strike 2 weeks ago. Does the president have a plan for what to do next? Does he need one, actually? Britt Hume joins us after the break. This is a Fox News alert. We're full of them tonight. The polls have closed in that special election in Georgia's 6th congressional district. Democrat John Ossoff is hoping he can flip the seat and deliver a strong rebuke to the president in a district that narrowly voted for him. Ossoff, by the way, is 30 years old. For more, we go to Jonathan Seri, who is in Sandy Spring, Georgia tonight. Hey, Jonathan.
Hi, Tucker. You know, when this evening began, this celebration at John Ossoff's party here, people were expressing cautious optimism. Now it has turned into downright enthusiasm, although only a fraction of the precincts are reporting. The news they're getting so far is good for Democrats. It shows Ossoff with a commanding lead. Now, it's anyone's guess whether he's going to win this election outright. This is what people are referring to as a jungle primary, where all 18 candidates, Democrats, Republicans, and independents, were on the same ballot. But if one of those candidates can get more than 50% of the vote, they win the election outright. If not, it goes into a runoff in June. Democrats obviously would like to win tonight. Some Republican strategists say they would prefer a runoff. Republicans have 11 candidates who have been taking votes from each other, but if it goes down to one candidate, then they can get voters to rally around them, and it becomes a more competitive contest. Tucker?
Jonathan, thanks a lot for that. We'll be bringing you updates throughout the night on that race in Georgia. It's been almost 2 weeks since the United States hit a Syrian air base with 59 Tomahawk missiles. After the attack, many lawmakers, especially the more hawkish ones, called for President Trump to adopt a more aggressive policy on Syria. Does he really need to do that, though, to lock in a particular strategy in that country? We're joined now by Fox senior political analyst Britt Hume, who has watched this kind of thing for a long time and has a perspective some of us don't. Britt, great to see you tonight. So does the president need a Syria policy that's different or not?
I don't think he needs one yet, Tucker. And I think what happened here is that the use of the chemical weapons provided a kind of target of opportunity for the Trump administration to display a willingness to use force. Right. Condoleezza Rice said to me years ago when she was Secretary of State that the United States and a few of its allies practice diplomacy in a way that few, if any, other nations on earth do, certainly few of our allies, which is to say diplomacy backed by the possibility of the use of force. Of course, if you're going to have that possibility alive in people's minds, every now and then you have to do it. So he did it here, and then he did it later, as we saw in Afghanistan. In both cases, these were events that he could carry out. They have a purpose to respond in the case one to Assad's use of those weapons, and in the second case to try to attack that complex of tunnels being used by ISIS in Afghanistan. Those things have a validity of their own, but they also serve the purpose of saying to the whole world, we're not afraid to use force. And of course, you know, he's moving the USS Vincent toward the waters off Korea, although they haven't gotten there yet. But certainly, Kim Jong-un knows they're on the way. That carrier battle group. These actions on his part do not, in my mind, require him now to come forward and state some full-blown long-term and short-term strategy in either Syria or even North Korea. But they do introduce into the equation the prospect that the U.S. might use force. And of course, the possibility of the use of force has been basically off the table now for the past 8 years and maybe arguably longer. So he's changed the atmosphere, but I'm not at all sure that if he never went back and did anything, he still would have, for the time being anyway, changed the atmosphere in the world about what the United States might do.
This is going to be gravely disappointing to a lot of his critics who hate everything he's done except this and who see the attack on Syria as an appetizer and the main course being Iran. You're saying that this is not, that he hasn't become neoconservative all of a sudden. He's in effect just doing this for strategic reasons, but it's not part of some grand plan.
Right. I mean, these things have tactical effect in the sense that they do affect the situation Bashar al-Assad paid a price for using the chemical weapons in the sense that he lost part of his air power.
Right.
And in Afghanistan, the use of that massive bomb had the effect of killing a bunch of ISIS fighters and damaging a tunnel complex that they'd been using against the Afghan regulars and our own forces. So these things had military purposes, but as I say, military purposes that are valid and stand alone, but they also had the additional effect of changing the diplomatic atmosphere. And I think, that we've been trying this. We talked about the use of force for some time now, and as if it were an option. But under President Obama, it never really was, and he proved that in Syria.
Right. Certainly this kind of force, on public display. Do you think the administration has decided to effect regime change in Syria to oust Assad from power?
I think that's the secondary objective and not a near-term objective. I think the near-term objective in Syria is to try to wipe out ISIS. And then at that point, look at the situation and see where we go from there. I mean, we're obviously, Assad's no American ally. His regime has not been. And I think, obviously, they'd like to see him go, and the country can hardly recover from this hideous war with him still in power. So I think that's a secondary objective. And so I think, it'll be a while before we know how they follow through once objective number one is affected.
Well, I think you put a lot of his supporters at ease tonight. Britt Hume, thanks a lot for joining us.
You bet, Tucker.
Well, today is tax day, and most of you are probably a little grouchy about what you had to pay. A lot. Up next, we'll talk to a professor who says taxes should be far higher than they are, maybe above 80%. That means you, viewers of this show. Stay tuned. It's tax day, the day in which you and more than 100 million other Americans ritually provide the federal government with 10, 20, or even 30% of your income, maybe 40 or higher, to finance our vast federal bureaucracy and various bombing campaigns around the world. Most people hate tax day, but Caroline Heldman is a big fan. It's hard to find him, but we did. She's a political science professor at Occidental College out in California, and she loves tax day so much she wants to expand it bigly. She's called for upping the top tax brackets in America to 80% or more. Professor Heldman joins us tonight. Professor, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Tucker.
So I just want to get to motive here for a second. Do you want the tax rate to go up to pay for more stuff or as a way to punish rich people?
Well, neither of those things. And let's be clear, I'm not talking about taxes for your viewers. I'm talking about taxes for the top 1%, and I'm not even talking about all of their income. I'm talking about the marginal tax rate, the highest rate, which right now is set at $470,000. So I'm talking about wealthy individuals who on $470,000 plus would be taxed at a much higher rate than they are now. And in fact, historically, for example, under Eisenhower and JFK, they were taxed at 91%. Now they're taxed at less than 40%. And this has meant that we've scrimped on the social safety net. We've scrimped on education. There are lots of things that this money could go for.
Well, we spend more on those than almost anyone else in the world. But to answer my question, I mean, you want to buy more stuff. It's not just because you object to the existence of rich people. You're not trying to hurt them. You just want to pay for more stuff.
Well, I don't think rich people are held to the same standards as other taxpayers. So I think that there are loopholes in their armies of lawyers and estate planners that allow them to hide their wealth. I would like to see that money go into the economy. I mean, taxes are the price we pay for civilization. I would love to see, free higher education. I would love to see our infrastructure, our crumbling infrastructure system funded in the United States. There are a lot of things that this money could go for if, wealthy people were fairly taxed, and they just aren't.
So you're from an affluent family. What does your mom think of this?
My parents, my family gives a lot in philanthropy, just as I do. I'm not on the top 1%, but, we are people who practice what we preach, and that means that you give a lot of money away in terms of nonprofits. I also use tipping of servers as a mechanism for redistributing wealth.
I'm confused. Okay, no, but I'm for all those things. I'm for philanthropy, and I'm especially for tipping waiters. I agree with you 100% on that, and so God bless you.
Glad to hear it, Tucker.
But you're asking other people to give their money to the government. Why aren't you giving 70% of your income to the government? You could.
Well, I'm not on the top 1%, but I have no issue.
You don't need to be.
Well, that's the argument I'm making, right? That it's not about working class Americans or people like me who are upper income Americans. It's about really the wealthiest top 1%. Now, I have no issue
you're a college
paying
professor.
taxes.
I'm not attacking you, by the way, at all.
I pay about 30%.
But why not pay 70%? I don't understand. Like, what's holding you back? Why not lead by example?
Tucker, you know what's holding me back? If I knew how to do that, I would have no issue doing that. But the tax code is incredibly convoluted.
No, it's totally no. Trust me. Let me simplify it for you. Just write a check, pay your taxes, then figure out what you pay 30%. You said. Just figure out what another 40% of your income would be, and just send it to the U.S. Treasury. Washington D.C. No zip code required.
You know what I do, Tucker? You know what I do instead of that? Because we don't have a fair system of taxation, I write checks to nonprofits that are providing services that the government should be providing.
Okay, but
I write checks to Planned Parenthood. I write checks to nonprofits that provide a safety net for Americans. So it has the same effect.
I think you may be, but it doesn't actually. So why not pass a law requiring people to send money to charities that are more effective than the government is? I mean, so you're basically conceding.
That would be great too, as long as the 1%
is not the most efficient way to lift up the poor. Then why won't you send it to the government then?
Tucker, I would say this train wreck of a Trump government is certainly not the best way to serve the poor, since they have no interest in serving the poor. But in general, I think government does a fine job providing the services
I'm just asking you to practice what you preach. Let me just ask you one other question here.
I do practice what I preach.
Well, you don't. You're telling other people to send their money to the government, and you're not. So,
I'm telling the top 1%. No, Tucker, don't put words in my mouth. I am telling the top 1%. I am saying the government needs to tax them fairly. If we're going to talk about taxation, I actually think I'm taxed pretty fairly. I choose to spend way more than the majority of my income on other people. I choose to do that, but we're not talking about me. We're talking about.
Of course, we're not talking about you. You don't want to do it.
We're talking about the top
It sounds awful.
Tucker, no, you don't get to do this. You don't get to lie. You don't get. No, Tucker, you don't get to put words in my mouth. We're talking about the top 1%.
Professor,
you're noting the obvious. I'm not on the top 1%. It's not about me. This is not an argument about me.
But not you. Oh, it's not
yes,
about you. Okay, I get it.
Yes,
it's never
yes,
about.
That's the argument.
People proposing it. Let me ask you one quick question, though. I understand.
It's the marginal tax rate on the top wealthiest Americans.
There's a real concern, I think, about accumulation of wealth at the top. It's probably not good for society. I bet we agree on that.
It's not.
But it's not about income. It's not about your income taxes. It's about capital gains taxes, taxes on investment, on capital that is working. That's how people get rich. Nobody's making $1 billion from a salary. Are you suggesting raising the capital gains tax rate to 70% too?
I am suggesting raising the capital gains tax on the wealthiest 1%. I am suggesting raising the income tax.
To what?
economists say somewhere around 50% would be good. Income tax, you can go as high as 83%, and it won't suppress wealth pursuit.
But why would you want to tax labor more than capital? Why are you giving a pass to rich investors? I don't understand. Just why are you taxing working people?
The wealthiest 1%. I would like to tax them at higher rates across the board on their salary, on their investments, and also on what they're passing to the future generations. I want to see the death tax go up. I want to see all of it go up because right now the top 1% do not pay their fair share.
Okay,
they just
gotta go. But call me when you start sending all your money to the government, and then I'll follow. I'll follow suit. It's hilarious.
I'll call you when I'm on the top 1%. How's that, Tucker?
Perfect. We'll have lunch. Thanks, Professor. Up next, Variety Magazine is giving Chelsea Clinton a Lifetime Achievement Award. She's achieved a lot in that short life. We'll tell you what spectacular accomplishments she has accrued to warrant such a coveted honor. Variety's New York bureau chief will explain. Plus, while Chelsea is being honored, a new book is offering the first autopsy of her mother's failed presidential campaign. Why exactly did Hillary Clinton lose a race she seemed certain to win? We'll give you some of the evidence next. The press is already propagandizing on behalf of the inevitable Chelsea Clinton campaign for something. This very night, Variety Magazine is naming Chelsea, quote, an impact honoree at their annual Power of Women dinner in New York. So for good measure, they also slapped her on the cover of their magazine. Besides being very fortunate in her choice of parents, why does Chelsea warrant such an award? Ramin Satuda is Variety's New York bureau chief. He interviewed Chelsea, and he joins us tonight. Ramin, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you for having me on. Just two quick corrections. First of all, it's not a dinner, it's a lunch. And second, it's not a Lifetime award. It's an award that is in partnership with Lifetime, the network. And so there's some confusion on the internet. So I'm thankful for the ability to be able to correct it on your show. But it's not a Lifetime award. Chelsea Clinton is 37 years old, and so we're not giving her a Lifetime award.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt you will, but these things take time.
Why would we give her a Lifetime award at 37?
Why are you giving her this award? That's what? Why? I mean, look, I'm open-minded. But why are you giving her this award? What has she done to warrant it and the magazine cover?
So in order to answer that question, I just need to provide your viewers with some context. Every spring, Variety hosts a Power of Women luncheon. And we select women who we think should be honored for using their influence to shine a spotlight on charitable organizations that do good in the world. Last year we had your former colleague Megyn Kelly as one of our honorees on the cover of Variety. And this year, in addition to Chelsea Clinton, we have other women including Jessica Chastain, Blake Lively, Gayle King, and other women who have used their power to shed light on an important cause.
But you're making my exact point. So Megyn Kelly's from upstate New York. Everything she has, she made herself. A lot that is also true of a lot of those other women. And whether you agree with their politics or not, they did a lot. Chelsea Clinton, I just looked this up. She's been a documentary filmmaker. She worked at a hedge fund.
She's a producer for documentary film.
Right.
Yeah.
She had a paying gig on the Today Show. She's now a professor at an Ivy League college. Has she hit 18 holes in one? I mean, I guess the point is her very life seems like an insult to the idea of the meritocracy because she got all of that because of her parents. Isn't that a little embarrassing? I'm not attacking her. I'm just being honest.
You're saying that her life is an insult because she was born to a prominent family? That seems like a very strange thing to say, Tucker.
No, I'm saying you get a job at a hedge fund, you get a big gig on morning television, you become an Ivy League professor, you become a documentary film producer, whatever that is, and it's like those things are not connected in any way. Those are very different skill sets. So unless she's like a genius in all of them, then this is just nepotism, and it's insulting to all the people trying to make it in this world.
It's not nepotism. We're actually honoring Chelsea for her work with an organization called the Alliance for a Healthier Generation. And regardless of your political affiliation, whether if you're a Republican or a Democrat, this organization does a lot of good. It helps fight childhood obesity, and Chelsea is very involved in this cause. And I've spoken to members of the board of directors of this organization. I've spoken to kids who have benefited from this organization. And Chelsea works very hard with this organization to fight childhood obesity, which is a problem in many of our schools.
No, and look, and I don't want to be mean to Chelsea, and I certainly don't.
I'm glad to hear that.
I mean it, and I don't want to be mean to you.
I'm genuinely glad to hear that.
But every once in a while, I do an interview that feels a little too soft to me. I think, was that a suck-up interview? I don't know.
Like with the president?
Yeah, no, I didn't actually suck up to the president, but there have been other people I have, and I felt bad. I read your interview with her. It was like, this needs to be in the museum, in the suck-up display. Was it frustrating to see the foundation attacked? Where does your empowerment come from? I just felt like, come on. Why is Chelsea Clinton
You're reading questions out of context. If I went back and I read questions that you asked the president, who is a very powerful man, I could flip that on you. But At the same time,
no,
Chelsea
I mean,
Clinton
I did ask
isn't.
real questions,
Chelsea Clinton
actually,
isn't.
the
I asked her real questions too. If you read the story on Variety.com, you'll see there are real questions in there. But Chelsea Clinton isn't a politician. She's a private person with very public parents, and she's using her platform and her status to do good in the world, and that's what our issue celebrates, and that's what our luncheon celebrates on Friday. And I would hope, I don't know if you're here in New York or you're going to be in DC, but if you'd like to come and you'd like to learn more about the event, you're very welcome to come. We'd like to extend an invitation for you to come.
I would definitely overeat for sure, and that would be ironic among other things at a childhood obesity luncheon. But let me just get back to really quick the question I asked you a minute ago. If you're just like someone with no connections at all, and you're from the middle of the country, you don't know anybody, and you look up and you see someone who's getting all like the fruits of our society handed to her, don't you feel a little bit like this is a rigged system? A little bit? Really, a hedge fund manager and a college professor and a morning show person and a documentary film producer, right? Do you see what I'm saying or no?
I see what you're saying, but I think what you're saying doesn't apply to Democrats or Republicans.
I'm not making a political point.
It's not a political point, but you could make the argument for any child of any politician. And there are children of politicians who have gone on to have TV careers and have been successful. And I think they've worked hard to be able to do that. And other children, politicians choose different routes. And so what we're saying is Chelsea Clinton has used her influence for good causes, and we'd like to celebrate that.
All right, Ramin, I'll see you at lunch on Friday.
Great. We'll look forward to it, Tucker.
I'll be there with the bib. Thank you very much. Well, a special edition of the Friend Zone with Chris Stirewalt is next. Missed that.